We humans have always searched for a better way to tell a story. From cave paintings to the internet, we've been on a constant hunt for innovation. Now, there are so many stories out there, we often forget how good we've all gotten at it. So good, in fact, that now we tell better stories together. Better stories when we collaborate. Hi, I'm Joe Unger, and this is Pinball Rules, where we learn what it means to design for humans. From the very start of his career, author and narrative designer Matt Forbeck was delving into narrative collaboration. Having worked across some of the largest properties ever known, Marvel, Star Trek, and Halo, just to name a few, other people's stories have been his playground. But perhaps his most influential work has been in tabletop role-playing games, the genre that pioneered narrative collaboration. When I sat down with Matt, we talked about how licenses, games, and novels made Matt into the master collaborator he is today. Later in the show, we'll hear from our creative commentator, Trisha Williams, and she'll share how collaboration changes our approach to creativity. But now that you're a few blocks into that run, turn it up and let's talk with Matt Forbeck about writing, mega licenses, and collaborating to create better stories.
It really depends not on the project so much as the people you're working with, right? When I do the Marvel Encyclopedia or the books I'm doing for DK is a licensor or licensee of Marvel. So I'm on my own for the research. I have to go out and do my own research. They assume that I'm an expert already. But obviously I can't call to mind every damn detail about Captain America or Spider-Man or whoever's life over the 75 years that, for instance, Captain America has been published. I have to go out and re-research this stuff and take notes, get it all down. And I'm pretty much on my own to go do this. And they have approval rights over everything else, but as long as I source everything properly, it's not going to be an issue. Now, I also write Halo novels, and I'm working with Simon & Schuster and the guys at Gallery Books and Pocket Books. And 343 Industries, which is a division of Microsoft that develops Halo these days, they're really hands-on. From the moment I sign the contract, even before I sign the contract, are talking to me about different ideas, different possibilities. They're very proactive and very positive. But I'm actually developing core IP elements for 343. So they take it much more seriously that way. If I was developing core IP stuff from Marvel, I would assume that they would take it as seriously as well. But a lot of that is I'm being a historian for them, right? I'm going over stuff that's already been created. So there's no need for them to really sit down and say, where are you going with this? Whereas if I go to do something that's all new IP, or all new material for an established IP, like I do with the Halo novels, they want to know where I'm going because that's going to become part of their established canon for their universe at that point.
So do you find it easier to curate a world rather than create one?
Oh, it's much easier. I've got days where I'm just tired and I can't do any writing. I'm just like, oh, my brain's shot for writing novels, right? But for writing an entry in an encyclopedia, I'm like, I'm going to read some comics, I'm going to take some notes, and I'm going to write it up. Well, there's definitely some skill there, but it's not a creative urge going on, right? I'm not creating something new for Spider-Man or Captain America or the X-Men or whatever else. I'm recording what's there and trying to boil it down to its essence so that it fits in within an entry in an encyclopedia. And that is a very different type of skill. It's closer to technical writing than creative writing. But having come from game design, doing tabletop game design, that is also essentially technical writing, right? Where you, even if you're doing the creative end where you're coming up with rules and everything else, once you come up with that, then you have to codify them in a manner that is instantly explicable and understandable to the reader. And that is something I try to achieve when I'm doing the encyclopedias as well.
Like you've said, you spent a lot of time writing for the tabletop game industry. Have you found it different to write for novelization versus collaboration, things like tabletop and role-playing games?
Yeah, they're very different things. I mean, I do original novels as well, and it's so you have three different stages there. You have when you're doing world building for a tabletop game or even a video game, you're basically saying, I'm going to build this world out, and I'm going to give the players, they're going to be the main characters, the protagonists throughout the entire thing, and I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm just going to give them lots and lots and lots and lots of options. So you try to build a world that's very rich in possibilities and what we call adventure hooks for people to grab into. When you're writing a novel, you don't have to do nearly as much world building, right? If you're writing a licensed novel, a lot of the world building's already been done for you. If you're writing an original novel, you have to do the world building and then create the plots and the characters and everything else. When you're writing the licensed novel, often those are original plots and stuff you're coming up with, but you're basically working on some world that somebody's already done. That means they've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you. You can concentrate just on the plot and the characters and how they all interact together. And then the far end of that is having to write a novel all on your own, where you have to do the world building and the plot and the characters. But there you get to cheat, right? Because the neat thing about world building is that you basically are setting up television sets or movie sets. So if you've ever been on a television set or a movie set, every dollar goes into what it goes on the screen, right? But 3 feet off that or 6 inches off that, it's duct tape and baling wire. Because they just need the stuff that'll hold together the stuff that looks beautiful. You don't put any money or effort into the stuff that's off screen, right? Now, when you're writing and doing world building for a book that you hope will become a series, obviously you're going to do a lot more than that. But I think the temptation a lot of people have when they're doing world building for fiction, if they've done all this work on this, they have all this beautiful details down to like what kind of coinage they use in this one market, in this one city on an island off the coast of this other continent, then you're tempted to show that off. Because you thought that was cool enough to actually do something with, right? But then you're tempted to show it off and do these information dumps, as they're called, where you just bore the hell out of people with these details that are really exciting to you, but probably nobody else gives a damn, right?
Yeah, the Tolkien problem. It feels like he spends 30 pages describing a bush.
Exactly. And and it's fascinating to Professor Tolkien, but maybe not to all his readers, right? And I think as somebody who's telling stories, you need to try to get to the point and tell people about what is going to cause them to turn pages and get them excited about the story and get them immersed in the characters and the emotions and everything else that's going on there. But if you've done too much world building, the temptation to show off is almost too much for a lot of people.
Have you found that when you're collaborating with other writers that it's easier to avoid those pitfalls, the getting lost in your own world?
Yeah, I think so. I think the neat thing about doing a collaborative project like that is that you get to rely on other people to do the stuff that really excites them. So if you got one guy who just loves monsters, you can set them on creating monsters, right? If you got another person who wants to do a magic system and they want to come up with something cool and innovative, you could set them on doing that. You do need to have a single or very close-knit team of vision holders, right? Otherwise, things tend to just spiral out of control in different directions, and they don't seem like they're all of a whole when they're done. And that person will say, well, this is true to what I think the vision is, or this is not true to what I think the vision is, and therefore it needs to change.
A good games writer uses a systematic approach to storytelling. Do you think that writing these narrative systems has better prepared you for other work?
I think in a sense it prepared me to be a better writer when I'm writing my own original novels because I know how to design a world. I also know the parts that I need. So I think one of the temptations when you sit down the first time is just design everything for a world, right? To build out everything. But having done this a number of times for games and worked on other people's properties, I can tell you what I need to worry about when I sit down. And for instance, when I did my Shotguns and Sorcery, I did not actually do a whole lot of world building for it. I knew pretty much what I wanted to do, and I built the world on the fly while I was writing it. Often I'm the guy who's charged with expressing the vision holder's ideas and then communicating those to the rest of the team so the rest of the team can understand what they're supposed to be working on. Because if you don't have that kind of communication, then you do not have a whole product at the end. You have something that just looks like it was bolted together, and you want something where you don't see any seams at all, where it looks like it was really one person's vision the entire way through.
We've talked about several approaches to writing. Is there any specific way that you gravitate towards?
Not really, because they're very different animals, and I think it scratches different parts of my brain to work on them. One thing I've learned over the years, if you want to do something really huge, massively big, incredible, it takes a team of people. Like if you want to do a movie, you want to do a big video game, whatever, that takes a team of people to work on. Even if you want to do a comic book, and that's a smaller version. I've worked on comic books. I wrote the Magic the Gathering comic books for a year, right? And that's usually a team of like 3 people or 4 people, right? But even then, you have to collaborate with other people. I like writing novels because that's just me and the page. And I don't have to collaborate with anybody. I have to talk to my editors when I'm done, but it's really just, when I'm writing an original novel, it's just me, and that's my vision entirely. But it's neat to see what kind of cool things other people bring to the table when you sit down and try to build something that's bigger than you could do on your own. And I think that's really kind of exciting and enjoyable too.
Sounds like you use novels as experiments, something to find the start of something more.
Yeah, actually I do. I mean, when I do something like, I got a great concept for something, I'm not sure if it's going to work out to something bigger or not. Let's try it as a book, because that way nobody can get between me and the idea beyond that. And that I own that novel. I own the basic intellectual property rights behind that. And that is something that's valuable to a creator at the end of the day.
Sounds like there's a lot of give and take, that in your own work you can let loose a little bit, but with new formats like digital media, that you can play with length and frequency.
Exactly. And a lot of it's just battling what people's expectations are. So as the expectations get shattered, it becomes easier. As soon as we had Netflix, we were able to put out shows that were varying length and nobody cared, right? But if you try to sell that to a network or even on cable television, people would have rebelled against it. They're like, no, this isn't fitting, or what are we going to watch? We can't have 10 minutes of blank air after that. How are we going to fill that space? So they end up having to do that. And it works out with the digital delivery systems. If you're doing webisodes or whatever, now we have a different expectation for something that's on YouTube. Right? If it's a 10-minute YouTube show, people are like, that's cool. And if it's a lot of people that would be happy to sit down and watch a 2-hour film on Netflix are not going to watch a 2-hour show on YouTube for some reason, even though they're both digital delivery systems, right? But part of that's just your expectations happen to be for whatever you happen to be doing at the time. And violating those expectations becomes difficult. Robert Frost, who's one of the greatest American poets, right? When he was confronted with free verse, and he didn't like free verse at all, which was a big movement where you didn't have to rhyme or meter or anything else. He said it's like playing tennis without a net. And you can imagine that. It's like you could still play tennis without a net, but it just wouldn't be the same thing. It wouldn't mean the same thing. It wouldn't have the same effect upon people. It wouldn't change the game in different ways, right? So you can screw with the rules about what you're doing, but again, then you have to explain to people what's happening. You have to say, this is free verse. We're doing things differently. Otherwise, it just looks like somebody blathering on a page.
Right? It's like looking at sports. In football and basketball, the objective of the game is still the same. Get to the ball to the other end of the court. You're basically doing the same thing.
Literally, the rules make the game, right? And if they have different rules, then it's a different game. Now, that doesn't mean you can't refine things. The NFL comes out with different rules every year, for instance, right? Trying to improve things or make things safer or whatever they're going to do. But the rules really do make the game. That's one of the things that game design really taught me, right? If it's not in the rules, it doesn't exist. Right now, there are exceptions to things like that, like, for instance, Monopoly, which I think is probably the worst game that's been foisted upon the public. But it's become a classic. I actually have a long rant about how much I hate Monopoly. But it's become a classic game that people play, and that's how they learn how to play board games, right? But most people play with like community chest, and you get the money in the middle if you land on chance or whatever it is. Those are actually not in the rules of the game, but it's just how the game was taught to you. So
when you approach a collaboration, someone else's world or story, where do you start?
So first thing you need to do is develop a love for whatever property you're working on. Because a lot of times you're taking something that is a licensed game and then or a licensed property like a film or a book or whatever, and then making a game out of it, right? And sometimes you're just coming up from scratch. But the first thing you do if you're doing a licensed game is you try to develop a love for the property. I did a game called Monster Rancher, which is based on I did a collectible card game based on the PlayStation video game and whatever, and the cartoon that was being shown in Japan, and then they had 26 episodes here in the States, right? And they said, we need you to design a Monster Rancher collectible card game. I'm like, and this is a cartoon for kids from 8 to 12 or something like that, or even younger. And I didn't have any 8 to 12-year-olds in my house at the time, and I was not watching shows like this. So I actually had to sit down and watch 13 hours of Monster Rancher and play the video game on the PlayStation 1. And by the time I finished with all that, I'm like, okay, I get what this is about. I get why the fans like it. I get what's exciting about this, what makes it different from other things. And now I can take that and translate that into something else, right? I can see that battling is a big part of this. I can see that raising them is a big part of this. I can see that the clock ticking is a big part of this, right? Which are different things than in Pokemon. Pokemon's just time-based. It's all turn-based battles. There's not ticking clock there. But with Monster Rancher, it's always about, oh my God, time's running out, you got to do this. So I had to come up with a time mechanic for the game, so that when you were playing, it actually felt like, oh God, time is running out. Even though it was a turn-by-turn played game, suddenly you would realize if I've only got 2 moves left, or I've only got 1 move.
Right, a systematic approach rather than an explicit one.
Exactly, and it generates the same kind of a sensation and emotion in the player that it does in the card game, that it does in the video game, and it does in the cartoon. So I think that's part of it, is boiling it down to its bare essentials, to its essence, and then seeing how you can translate over from one thing to another. And I think you always have to make sure that you, even if you can't personally, if you look at this and say, this is not mine, this is not for me, I would never come to Monster Rancher on my own. I think you need to develop that respect and love for it at some level to show that kind of respect to the consumers, right? If somebody's a fan of the Monster Rancher cartoon and comes over to this game and they go, this guy didn't get it at all. He didn't understand what he was designing. This means nothing. It's nothing like what I love about this. You've just wasted their money. You've wasted their time and their effort. And I think you need to have respect for the people who are going to be paying you money at the end of the day. Right? If somebody's going to pay me for their entertainment dollar, I think that they should get value for that entertainment dollar. I do take that seriously. Yeah.
So as a narrative designer and a writer, what have you come to define as design?
I think design is the intentional creation of something for a distinct purpose. So I think that when you're designing something, you have an end in mind, you know what this is going to be, and you figure out what the parameters are. Often I'll design backwards. I'll figure out what I want the end product to be and then design backwards from that. I think if you're going the other way, like we were talking before, it was more art, right? Where you're just like, let's see where this takes me, let's see where it goes. If you have a purpose for something, then you design to that purpose. And I think that intent and end use are always the defining characteristics there.
Welcome to part 2 of our show. This is Joe Unger.
And this is Trisha Williams.
And we just got done talking to Matt Forbeck, kind of a collaborator extraordinaire. So Trisha, what was your takeaway?
I think it was really interesting the way that he compared working on a project solo and working on a collaboration project, especially when it comes down to how much control you have over everything. Obviously, when you have a lot more people working on it, you have to take everybody's ideas, you have to put it in there, it makes it much more fleshed out. But if you're just going to test something out, if you just want to see if your idea works, putting it into a book, a smaller project, and putting it out there and getting that feedback can help form a larger project to turn into a collaboration.
Particularly coming from your background, because you've been a professor trying to lead these collaborations, being an independent artist on your own work with Gamer Girls, and also a creative director in our own studio here, and how different the approaches have to be between each of those points of creativity and collaboration, right? Which thread do you think kind of spans through it all?
Definitely being a professor. That is definitely the hardest, and it's the thing that taught me how to do both individual works and collaboration better, because I got to see it from the outside.
What have you found to be some of the traits that people have that make them successful collaborators and successful vision holders?
You can't be married to your own idea. That's the number one thing. You need to be able to...
I thought you said you were going to... You can't be married at all.
You can't be married, no.
It
just destroys relationships. That you can't be married to your own idea because you need to be able to step back and see if your idea is actually worth anything for this product. Is if you have a great idea and you know that it's right, yeah, stand by it. But just because you came up with it and you think it's cool, most of the time you have to throw it out. It's gone. Just get rid of it.
Right. It's like Matt talking about finding the love for the product, right? When he was talking about his Monster Rancher point in time, where it was maybe something that he never had experienced or never would come up because, you know, he's not an 8-year-old boy or for that product line, but he found a way to find the love for it.
Monster Rancher was an awesome product. I played the hell out of that game. I never watched the show, but the game was great. Yeah, you do have to find the love. And if you can't, your product is just going to be mediocre. It will never come out if you can't find at least one thing that you love about doing that. And it might not even be the product. It might be the team. You might love that team and what they're doing to advance the product. That could be enough in order to keep it going.
It almost goes back to our point with Josh talking about empathy again, right? You have to find why somebody else would love this as well as yourself.
And it's very hard not to want to defend your ideas. It's very hard to be able to take a criticism or to understand that your idea isn't going to work, or even if it would, that it's simply not going to make it in the game. Or a project, whatever it is. That's hard. It's a hard thing to do, and there's really no magic way to get over that or to change that. You simply have to learn to adapt.
Right. It fundamentally changes your approach to being creative, to, again, a more empathetic view, where you have to find the love for other people's ideas as well, and really start to judge them on what they're finding valuable from that.
And one of the tricks that I learned was, if I really, really loved an idea that I had and I realized that it probably wasn't going to work and it was going to be somebody else's idea, in my head I had those two little ideas battling, right? The best way that I could approach it is to step back, take the idea from the other person, and put it in a different project in my head. How would I see that idea? And I immediately could see all the goods about it.
In my experience, collaboration is much better. I like working with people. I feel like it's more ideas, more voices that are chiming in. If your ideas and your creativity can withstand that din, then your ideas are all the stronger for it. Rather than things getting watered down, you wind up being this like superstar. You've got this idea that just made it past 10, 20, 100 people. And so you know that 100 people like it, so what's to stop 1,000?
Yeah, I simply can't think of a time in my life where collaboration wasn't helpful. More ideas, more brains, more feedback makes things stronger.
Right. You're fundamental point of view is not shared by another person.
Right.
Like, no one is you. So what you think is cool is just what you think is cool, whether that be a game system or a movie or a building. So collaboration, whether that be architect to community or designer to designer or artist to artist, is kind of the way to make yourself better.
Yep.
Pinball Rules Podcast is recorded in San Diego, California, featuring your hosts Joe Unger, creative commentator Trisha Williams, science commentator Sergei Gepshtein, audio direction and original music by Michael David Peter, and production assistance from Laura Rapaulski. For more information on our guests and downloads, go to pinballrulespodcast.com. Pinball Rules Podcast is a copyright of Pigeonhole Productions 2015.